Alright, Big Dex here. We're going to go on something called a pub crawl, AI 1312, directed by Christina. And this is going to be awesome. You'll probably meet Christina later on. And so, cool. So the pub crawl is something like we go to the bars and tell people, or not necessarily bars, but just places, eatery on Friday nights, tell people about the work of Amnesty, and maybe they can give us a little bit of donation for all the work we're doing. And we're going to educate people here who have the rights about people who don't have the rights. Right? Got it. Okay, cool.
It is the most important social dimension of our time, rights. Well-accepted universal standards of living endowed to humanity that ensure we all have access to health, clean water, energy, and fair labor. But most important are personal rights, human rights, the unassailable bequests from birth that allow us to live with dignity and pursue self-determination. These rights are bedrocks in our society today. But many in world communities still live without these standards. Devoid and deprived of such principles, they are destitute to them. Their only hope, us, the public. Remediation can only be achieved through public attention, particularly for those impoverished. To play our part, we in the Hague Files joined the volunteers of Amnesty International. Participating fully, we learned exactly how effective public campaigning can be in improving the conditions of those without. Beginning in Europe and crossing North America, this is our story.
We're not ready. 6 months. 6 months. That's a lot of days. How many people died every day? 1,500. Okay. So we're here again. And when do we want this? Now! See all 25,000 people gone since the last time they took that chance.
Yes, we can!
As can be seen, social concerns targeted by the pub crawl are global in nature. Hence, on occasions, there's a need to coordinate campaigns with our cross-Atlantic colleagues. So we've landed here, on the US East Coast, to get a glimpse at how our overseas counterparts work on pub crawl issues.
Writing a letter for somebody, you can either write to the government or write to that individual who is in prison, who needs your help, as like words of solidarity, anything that you like. You could even say, you're awesome, and then sign the letter. But I do it because I feel like every letter really counts, and it's amazing because it's such an individual act, but because we're doing it with so many people all across the world, like that makes a huge difference. And for someone feeling like, you know, you're just living your life in your own world, it really connects you to what we're all trying to accomplish, which is universal rights.
It is known as a disaster in our time. A conflict so unexpected that it was never foreseen. Born out of the Arab Spring, the Syrian conflict became a flashpoint of violence and some of the greatest humanitarian crimes ever to be seen in modern times. Beginning as just civil dissent, the contention morphed into a scourge of aggression, displacement, and destitute. The region thus became a fusion of human suffering, and for a showed no sign of respite nor cessation. Deeply concerned, Mid-Atlantic volunteers began a series of community vigils to recognize the human trauma ongoing in the region. Each vigil gave compelling eyewitness accounts of the day-to-day ordeal enduring Syria's common citizenry, of whom were fast becoming displaced refugees. Most mindful was the obscure generation, the lost children whose world now bordered complete destruction. If impelled, they would never know normal life or scholastic aptitude, never have roundabouts with friends, or a life filled with loved ones. And that is why we continue to gather, and the candles sustain the light, because for those who continue to endure, success depends upon the awareness of the world.
You can make a difference in Syria. Yes, you can help stop the violence by simply writing letters with friends and colleagues to your local representatives outlining the need to protect civilians within the country. You see, while the truncheon may be used in lieu of compassion within the country, it is the global community that can make peace mightier than the sword by bringing all the belligerents to the conference table. But that won't happen unless they hear from you. And therein lies a solution, because a critical mass of all of us connecting with representatives cannot be ignored.
Shadowing our counterparts, and with the issues at hand, we join our Mid-Atlantic colleagues on their pub crawl events. Their issues focus both domestic and international concerns, and emphasize the right to freedom of speech and freedom of expression.
But to stop repressing free speech, to repeal the laws that have curtailed people's liberties.
Key to each and every campaign was public action.
Incriminated with burglary of an unidentified person. That's what the report says.
Well, impressive for sure. And with sound mind and conviction, we prepared to head back to Europe to inform Christina and the gang about our U.S. Mid-Atlantic pub crawl experiences. But just then they told us of an astonishing event to come. A public action so unique that it would bend the boundaries of what could or couldn't be done in critical mass. But there was more. Going further still, the event would bring public attention to the doorsteps of responsible countries without any of the participants having to go anywhere. How can one get public attention of the countries without anyone having to go anywhere? Even the most indelible critical mass movements of our time were never able to do as such. This just didn't seem possible. But our Mid-Atlantic colleagues held steadfast, and for good reason, because they knew the concept had been tested before, and it did just what it professed. How it did it was astonishing.
System activated.
Get on the Bus was begun by a local group in Massachusetts, Somerville, Mass. And they would bus people from all around the Northeast. And they would rally in front of consulates. So they kind of talked with us, and since we're in Washington, D.C. in front of the big embassies, we decided to kind of copy their idea and bring it to Washington, D.C.
So here's what you do. Find a region of consulates or embassies approximating your area and isolate those particular institutions with your human rights concerns. With permit in hand and on a clear weather day, gather a critical mass of people to rally around each embassy and shout it down. And I mean, shout it down. The organized rally not only garners public attention, but in and of itself is the vessel that elucidates multiple human rights cases with multiple countries. Participants would need to go nowhere but on shuttle buses to get from building to building. Thus, in one fell swoop, global dimensions are reached without global travel. So the concept was brilliant, but like the rain in Spain, the name was plain and mundane. Now anyone with a head on the shoulder can clearly see a problem with shuttling people from point A to point B. What do you do when streets and alleyways are much too small for buses or vehicles to cross? The simple solution is to have participants get out and walk. But what if distance is involved and physical endurance becomes an issue? Well, such could quickly confound and denigrate any public event simply due to fatigue. And that's crucial because the critical mass needed to make an impact could wear down precipitously. With regard, a Washington, D.C. coordinator birthed an ingenious solution. An organized sub-event that would not only acclimate participants to endurance, but would create a precursor that would bring resources to the main event itself.
I like the idea of being outdoors and active. And so all of that to me said race.
A local park, a seasonal day, a sprinkle or spice of energy is all you need to run for human rights.
So the Run for Rights was the precursor event for Get on the Bus. And while that was happening, our colleagues were already thinking ahead, because within a fortnight, that bus would indeed come.
It begins in trickle, a diminutive clustering together with intent. The cluster builds a group. The group builds a mass. On this day, an avalanche of people will turn a mirror on a selected few countries, questioning whether their behavior is acceptable within the global community. Most would ignore us, but nonetheless come to understand that there are those aware and willing to disclose. And by day's end, skeletons in the closet would be exposed, and many would be astonished that we ever even knew.
First up, this lot, the Dominican Republic. We had a little question for them. Juan Almonte, the accountant for Dominica's Human Rights Committee, 5 years ago, just disappeared without a trace.
Where is Juan Almonte? We want to know. His wife wants to know. His children.
Last seen in police custody, we wanted to know if they knew where he was. The embassy, of course, just ignored us. But that only ignited flames because the specialty of Get on the Bus is noise. When we bring it, they get to hear it. Disregard only means audibles get higher and higher until they are staunch and too much to bear. Ironically, the Dominican government considers Juan Almonte a fugitive and claims to have investigated his disappearance also. However, an analysis by the Inter-American Human Rights Commission found any such to be seriously inadequate, almost contrivance to the task. So the campaign to find Mr. Almonte continues. But for us here now, there was much more on slate. We were ready for the wheels on the bus to go round and round.
La voix du peuple, the voice of the people. It is the audible, sometimes impossible to ignore when focused, en masse, and concentrated to a point. The strategy conspicuous. Move in critical mass with unprecedented voice. Time and time again, we would employ this craft, gathering publicly to rein the message clear. Stop violating human rights now. And as momentum grew, we grew, and those derived would carefully know where the bus would land them next.
That led us here, the Sudan. A little-known nation at the turn of the century. The country rose to global attention after a series of regional conflicts led to a devastating 2004 genocide in its western Darfur region. The incidents created one of the greatest humanitarian crises ever to be seen in modern times, and was only quelled by a 2010 peace agreement that saw many belligerents disarmed. However, a problem remained. Like dark energy, the matter was still banging. It exists in the form of leftover tension from Darfur and a civil war in the south that seriously threatened to topple the government there. All of it was being pushed from the top. And we wanted them to know that the bus was aware.
We want to continue to give to the people in Sudan, and Darfur in particular, is a message of hope. That we're here, we haven't given up on them, and they shouldn't give up on themselves.